Many people have written in and inquired about how we at Studio 57A restore our LP albums for our broadcasts. My good friend Don Larson, publisher of DigitalPassages.com, asked me the other day if I would produce a podcast for his audience on this very topic. Well, at first I reluctantly declined, as I really didn't have all of the latest information at hand on all of our processes. So I wrote to the author of a program we use here and asked if he would like to join me on our show. His name is Brian Davies and is the author of Clickrepair. This program removes the annoying clicks heard on vintage records and restores them back to nearly perfect condition. Brian is quite a remarkable individual. He is in fact a retired professor of mathematics who taught for many years at the Australian National University. He is the author of 3 books on nonlinear dynamics and integral transforms, and nearly 100 research papers in numerous theoretical, computational, and applied areas of science. Like many of us here, he is a true audiophile himself. So Professor Davies agreed to discuss his latest version of Clickrepair with me on this show. So on the phone with me, all the way down under, I would like to introduce you to Professor Brian Davies, who is currently in Melbourne, Australia. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Gene. Nice to hear from you.
Well, it is certainly a real pleasure talking to you in person. Those emails do get pretty sluggish over the years. Brian, I'd like to ask you how you got started in this entire process. You are an avid audiophile yourself, as you have told me over the last few months, and kind of give me a little bit of a background of how you got involved, a mathematician, into solving this extraordinary difficult problem.
Well, Gene, it really began in 2003 when I had already been retired emeritus for 2 years, and I had finished the more academic things that I wanted to finish. So I pulled out a lot of my old LPs and began to record them into the computer, and I wasn't happy with some of the noise and damage that was on them. So what got me started was looking around to buy some software to do this. I didn't really buy anything that was very expensive. I certainly tried a few products. I wouldn't like to name them on your program because I don't really want to talk negatively about other products. But what I found with a number of programs I tried for both Windows and Mac is that they have very good facilities for recording, editing, cutting up from LPs or any other audio source for that matter. Often they have good facilities for reducing hiss and noise like that. But I was totally unhappy with what they did to my audio files when I tried to remove the damage from dust, also scratches on the records. So actually I didn't find anything which would do the job except for one product which I will mention, which is called CEDAR, C-E-D-A-R, which is a fully professional stuff used by studios, but out of the price range of anyone like myself who's a hobbyist.
Well, it's exactly right, Brian. It's how I came across your website when I was very frustrated, and I was down in Tampa, Florida, trying to desperately get through the cutting edge of some of the 78s that I have sent you in the subsequent months that we've been working on in the new versions of Clickrepair, which is now called Clickrepair 2.
Well, I was going to say Clickrepair 2 has some new features, but the underlying methods and algorithms are the same, and we'll come back to that in a while, Gene, perhaps.
Berkeley, California, there's some other universities that have been working on these nonlinear modeling. How did you think differently than they did?
Well, I'm not sure how some of the other folk thought. The crucial point in what we're doing here is that it depends on having let's say an LP record which is in moderate to good condition, so that actually 99 or more % of the signal which is on there is perfectly usable. All you need is good record playing equipment, good amplifying equipment, and most of what you get off is good music that you're happy to listen to. That's the important point. So what you're looking for are just short passages, short pieces, usually from 1/10,000th to 1,000th of a second long, in which are damaged and severely damaged due to, say, a speck of dust or a scratch. And that's what makes this kind of problem different from, say, removing hiss, which is continuous noise, which has corrupted the whole file, and in which case it's unavoidable to filter it in some way. Is that partially clear, Gene?
Yeah, that's actually does explain to me. I didn't understand the timing a lot of this, and I should tell the listeners that I've been in science and engineering and music, so I have some intuitive feel of the timings that go on. I noticed on some of the things that I've been working on in treating the input impedance of the cartridge, and I wanted to touch base with some of the technical aspects of that. You had asked me what my equipment was in the past, and I said, well, I use a lot of Stanton equipment or some very top-line turntables from Pioneer or whatever, but you can buy them in garage sales or on online auction houses. And, the cartridges in them, if you buy a top-line turntable, they all have usually a Shore-type cartridge or Stanton-type cartridge or a Marconi. Well, I picked one up for $20. I remember I was telling you that Pioneer, which has got a very rare Marconi cartridge in it. But they all have a certain impedance they'd like to work into. And it ideally would be resistive, because the cartridge, as it hits the needle, as it hits the noise, creates an inductive kickback. And if you're science and engineering students out there who are into understanding that when you have an inductor, you store energy. The needle moves very quickly through that magnetic field, and then when it sees an impedance or a load impedance other than what is supposed to have been designed for, you can do one of two things. You can dampen that impedance. In other words, the needle on the record is like an inductor. It's a generator, and if it's not treated properly in the input impedance of the amplifier, you would have a spike that would be just astronomical. It'd be like a high voltage spike. So what I did, and a lot of people, you asked me, I said I use a tube amplifier, and I found that matching the impedance, which is normally 47 k ohms, I think, is that standard in Australia too?
Well, the matters you're talking about are standard all around the world, and it comes back to what I was saying. Actually, of course, my program is going to work on the digital file that you get after you've gone through the technicalities of getting it into your computer. I offer no help in terms of software with that, because that's a matter of wiring up good equipment, as you're talking of. But what I would like to say in response to the points you were just making, it's important to have good equipment, because it's important that the 99 or 99.9% of what's on your record, which is very listenable, possibly actually of more listenable quality than a lot of modern CDs, it's important to get that off so that we don't do anything to that. It's really important that we don't change any of the data which is good, which, as I said, may well be of a more listenable quality than a modern CD.
I agree with you.
Eugene, I know in your case we've restored some 78s. That's a different question, and I think we should put that aside until a little later.
Yeah, the material that I've picked up on the 1970, mid-70s to 85, as we were turning into a lot of the material was done digitally, mastered, and then pressed into a vinyl, a very high-quality vinyl. And I have put those on a spectrum analyzer. It goes well into the 30 to 40 kilohertz range. It's absolutely an enormous amount of data and does take up a lot of room. But yes, I concur, Brian, that it does, the analog, people seem to think it's so old. It is not. I'm sorry, because the microphones, like what we're talking on here in the studio, originally come out of an analog from the airwaves to the microphone chain and into a console, and the dynamics of these consoles are just really can reproduce square waves. When you record and you get a CD that's 41 kilohertz, you only have a few bits up at the 20 kilohertz to really respond to the drum signals or the dynamics. But when you take it and you have control of a good quality needle, correctly balanced and tracking with anti-skating, you can produce some extraordinarily, almost master quality recordings. Has that been your experience?
I don't have quite such good equipment as you do digitally for capturing, but I would certainly say that if you have good quality analog equipment, and then if you capture it at better than 16 bits, say 24 bits, and at a much higher capture rate, say 96 kilohertz, you're actually going to get a signal off your vinyl record which is better in its overall dynamic and frequency range than those which are imposed by the limitations of the CD standard. Those limitations were written in when the companies decided to go ahead with a marketable product in the late 70s, early 80s, and they're quite limiting indeed, Gene.
I agree, Brian, and a lot of people, like myself, have been very disillusioned when playing a symphonic record or a big band record that has a lot of dynamics of drums and brass, and the playing it loud, perhaps on even on a vintage speaker, it just sounds so tinny. But when I take a vinyl record, what you and I are doing, and a lot of people around the world have finally caught on to Clickrepair, that the response, even at 48 kilohertz, or in a lot of the computers have your ability to digitize above or intermediate between 96 kilohertz. The quality is just so remarkable. And it's in other words, you're listening to, especially some of the older records back in the 60s. I think we sent those to you in France, some of the recordings you did some demonstration up there when you were up there this spring. And, it's just, people hear it and it's astounding. And I said, no, analog isn't dead. Analog is with us all the time. And it's just a matter of living with a technology that circumvented many of the problems of the analog, such as wow and flutter, low frequency distortion, but in the long run, the higher frequency standards at 41.1 kilohertz does not hack the whole spectrum. But now with the modern computers, the Macintoshes, the PCs, and the other platforms, we now, as the consumer, is now with a plethora of these vinyl discs floating in garage sales, you have the chance, folks, to really unleash a remarkable product that will just astound anybody. Do you agree, Brian?
Yes, I do. So maybe I would like to talk a little bit more about how we use this high quality of input to find out where the damage on the record actually is and what we do to repair it. Well, I was talking about the 99%, but of course what is the ear is the 0.1% where the needle actually hits a small scratch or a speck of dust or something on the record, and that produces, although it doesn't produce a lot of sound energy, it's so far out of line with the music that you're listening to that the ear is very sensitive to that, because you were talking about analog records, but you have to remember the ear is also an analog device and a very, together with the brain, a very clever device at filtering and hearing things. So what I do in the program is to use the research, which over the years there's been a lot of research fueled by telecommunications mainly, because as I'm talking to you now, the same kind of technology that I've used in my program is being used to transmit my voice. The analog signal of me talking into this microphone is not being simply sampled and sent to you sample by sample. It's being analyzed for the patterns, and the patterns are being sent, so that you're not actually listening to my voice, you're listening to a close approximation that's been reconstructed by analyzing on the fly what I'm saying. And that's what I do in the program. You analyze the music on the fly to see what its characteristics are. You try to predict it. And then when you see something which is totally out of line, well, that must be noise. And you have to replace that with something which is a reasonable approximation, something plausible to the ear. The main problem with this is, of course, that it's statistical. There is no black and white, and it is possible to make mistakes. It's possible to miss clicks. It's also possible to identify something in the music as being not right and just remove it, which unfortunately is possible. I hope that basically explains to you and your listeners, Gene, what the fundamental and underlying technology is. It's not something which is original to me. It's something which has been developed by many, many scientists around the world over the last 4 decades and is coming into every device which fits in your home and which is used for communication.
Yeah, I notice in the new version of Clickrepair 2, the one you had sent me to do beta testing on back, I think it was this spring, and we looked at a number of different of the algorithms that you're making a decision as to which one we should perhaps use. And not to get into all of the technicalities of it, but we basically, I think the rest of your beta testers agreed with me that that one that was called Wavelet was the Wavelet 2, I believe it was the one. It had the least amount of mangling. And to me, when you finally released version 2 through its standard default settings, it just made all my work that I had done prior to that so obsolete. And it's just a tribute to you in getting out to the users like us and to listen to what we really need. And it's just, folks, if you haven't tried Clickrepair, it is absolutely astoundingly easy to use. This is a special broadcast for digitalpassages.com. And we are talking live with Professor Brian Davies in Melbourne, Australia, the author of Clickrepair. We'll be right back after this message. We're on the phone with Professor Brian Davies, the author of Clickrepair, who has been discussing some of the integral functions of this extraordinary piece of software, which is incidentally available for Macintosh and PC users. Brian, we were talking off the air a little bit about some of the pros and cons of Clickrepair, and we were talking about the need for broadband noise reduction, which Clickrepair is not quite ready to, well, the new versions, I believe, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, will include that. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect. I am working on and may have available some software for the reduction of both low-frequency noise and hiss, but because it's a totally different process from finding outlying and exceptional noise, which is what a click or a crack in the record is, it would be a separate program and would need to be run as a separate process, I think, Gene. So it won't become part of the Clickrepair program, which will always be focused on looking for outlying or unusual noise in what is otherwise assumed to be a good signal, that is music.
Yes, I noticed
That's very clear. Yes.
Yes, I noticed that when we were working on the 78 problems a few months ago, that the surface noise of the needle running so fast at 78 RPM is very high thermal noise, and I believe it's thermal or friction, whatever you want to call it. It mixes with the audio, and especially if it has been very worn or extremely dirty. And I have is still at this point has been no real breakthrough in resolving those issues. Is that your conclusion?
Yes, that is so, Gene. And in fact, I think the situation is a little worse than that, in that I don't think one can expect what you might call a breakthrough. The situation is rather like, it's as if you went into a cafe and you asked for black coffee and they put some milk in. It's not so easy to get the milk out once you've stirred it. But if you go and ask for a cold drink and they put an ice cube in it, then you can, as long as you're quick, get the ice cube out again. The ice cube is an unusual thing. Mixing the milk through is rather like mixing hiss or rumble or whatever through your record. And one more thing I might like to add is that the source of a lot of the noise on the old 78 shellac records is the fact that the shellac material is quite granular, and so the stylus, the pickup from which you are getting your sound, is literally grinding its way along the groove, bumping along these small particles which are big enough to make a considerable amount of noise.
Yeah, that's been my experiment that we were working on this spring, was to reduce or play back the entire 78 RPM at a lower speed, say it at a 45 or at a 16. And I had some results where the noise spectrum, once it was played back, was now pushed linearly back up into the ultrasonic and out of the digitization regime, and that worked a little bit. I think we probably, I don't know, maybe a 10 dB noise reduction in that area. But when I used Clickrepair and I took the stereo to mono, that improved it another 3 dB. Has that been your experience?
Well, yes, that's why the new version of the program has that option in. So if you are restoring a mono record, then you will, of course, have captured it on a record player which is recording in stereo. And the signal you get from the two walls, the left and the right hand of the groove, in principle ought to be the same. In practice, the differences between those signals will be quite randomly different in respect of the noise, but will be highly correlated with each other in respect of the signal. So if you make the mix in a dynamic way, which is what the new version of the program does, you can reduce the noise just by virtue of the fact that it's just a standard result of mathematics, that when you take two random processes and add them, some part of the randomness is lost, if you like to put it that way.
Yeah.
And that loss equates to a reduction in the noise that you hear, which is caused by that random process.
Well, we are very, very, very lucky to have come across you, Brian. And working with you over the last few months has been a tremendous inspiration to me to continue my work, because up to that point I really had given up on a lot of the products that were out there, and there's quite a few of them. We're not going to mention them, we're not going to degrade them, but I'll tell you what you have done for the restorationists across the world is quite evident, and anybody can get this program. It's quite available. It is on the internet. And Brian, tell me, where can they go?
Well, the main thing to remember is that the name is Clickrepair, and that is one word, not two words. Just the one word put together, Clickrepair. So I think if you Google that, that's the number one hit, provided you only put in the one word. Or it's the next easiest way to get it is www.kagi, that's Kagi, clickrepair, which is actually a redirect to my site.
Well, that's wonderful, Brian. Well, I'll tell you, this has been an extraordinary event here in Sedona, Arizona at Studio 57A. Again, you are the top dog, as they call it, in restorations in my studio. Everything that comes out of here and gets broadcast goes right through your program. It is an ingenious program, to say the least. It is very easy to use. And Professor Davies, is there anything else you'd like to say on your program or availability or costs?
Well, as far as the cost goes, one of the things which upset me when I started looking to restore my own records was the high cost of anything which might feasibly do a good job. We were looking at $1,000 or even many thousands of dollars. And I wanted this to be available to hobbyists. In fact, currently the cost is $35. I don't expect that I will increase that. And my policy has been with the new version that users who already bought a license which costs $25 will not have to pay and do not have to pay any extra. If you have time, do you have time for me to add some other comments, Gene?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I wanted to add some other comments about 78 records and other software. Currently I'm working on a 3-record, a 6-side set, recorded in 1925 of Percy Grainger playing some Chopin, an absolutely fantastic performance of Chopin's Sonata No. 3, an early electrical recording, so you cannot expect to recover from that a hi-fi listening experience. So what I have been doing is using the techniques which in fact I largely got from Eugene in relation to capturing it at 45 RPM so as to get, as you were pointing out, so as to shift the noise into a different place, but it doesn't remove the noise. Then I've been using my program to remove the outliers, that is the scratches and the clicks and the crackle caused by the shellac particles. But I must emphasize to your listeners that I have also then been using a good third-party product for the further reduction of the hiss which remains, because my program does not handle that problem. So I thought that might interest your users, that I have in fact recovered a low or mid-fi copy, but a very exciting and very listenable performance, which is 80 years old, Gene.
That's amazing how old the Edison invention has been in sound and film. Thomas Edison did all of this, and I had a chance also to take a look at some 1800 cylinders, and I'm still trying to get an apparatus to restore that. It was recorded in, I believe, down in Fort Myers, Florida. And as soon as I get the transcribed from these cylinders, I'll certainly send it to you and see what we can do with it. And that's quite a challenge. That was from the Edison Inventors Club that sent that to me. I think it was about 1878. It's priceless, and it's of course done with a cylindrical lathe with no electronics or whatever. But it's going to be interesting to see what we're going to get out of that.
Yes, well, Gene, there has been some a performance of Brahms recorded at the end of the 19th century. It's been treated by some people at Stanford in the music department. They certainly have not recovered anything which you would want to sit and listen to, but they have been able to determine what Brahms's performance of his own music was like. And there's really interesting historical information to be recovered here, not just hi-fi listening.
Yeah, it is. It is extraordinarily challenging to world viewers. It is a hobby, really, for a lot of you people out there. And you need to get involved in it. Feedback to Professor Davies. or me here at Studio 57, or Don Larson at Digital Passages, where technology and science and the arts are always in the forefront of our mind. The history of sound, recording, and film is just phenomenal. And when you get a hold of products at garage sales or on the internet, just make sure that you do have a product that you can buy that will help restore it. And that is the bottom line here tonight. Professor Davies, it has been an honor to talk to you finally after all of these fine months, with you flying to France, and it's just an extraordinary development in what you have done for the average home user. And that's just about it, Brian, and I thank you so much for joining us on Studio 57A, and this is Music of My Life.